Hey, I'm James, and welcome to my community garden. Let me show you around. So one of the things that I love most about this garden is its location. I'm here in Chicago in my local neighborhood, and we're not far from Lake Michigan, which is on this side, the shores, the harbor. We've got some local businesses that are here in the park. There's a driving range. So this is a real sort of neighbor and community hub. And one of the things that is super fun about the story of this particular community garden is it was brought into fruition by a bunch of folks in the community, people who are in these high rises alongside the park and looking down at this grass saying, hey, maybe we should make a garden there. And so they reached out to their local alderman's office in Chicago. They're sort of like a mini mayor, if you will, and said, hey, we'd like to work in our local park and make a community garden. There was nothing here but just turf and grass, and we could put flowers and vegetables and fruits of all sorts. So our local alderman at the time, Alderman Tom Tunney, and our current alderman, Bennett Lawson, both of them together have helped, and their teams and their staff have helped to make those volunteer goals a reality. And over the course of the last 8 years, as this community garden has developed, evolved, and grown, and flourished, and expanded multiple times, we couldn't have done it without the help of our local businesses as well. Bacino's is a neighborhood restaurant not far over my shoulder here, and they supply our garden with water. So we couldn't water everything that you see here without the participation of our small business community in Lakeview East. So I'm really excited about how all of these collaborations have created a space where not only plants, but people can thrive alongside each other, growing and tending and caring to our gardens. So let me show you some specific things that I'm really excited to point out. So my particular plot is in the back corner over here. And if you take a look at the way that these gardens are set up, we're lucky enough to have these solid wood raised beds that our volunteers have built for the gardens to use. Most of these beds are 4 feet by about 8 feet long. And so because there's so many people waiting to grow and garden in our very population dense neighborhood, we actually have to share these. So typically a neighbor will have half of a 4 by 8 foot bed. So this monstrosity right here, this beautiful, gorgeous plant, has been raised and lifted up on stakes. In a larger suburban or country garden, perhaps this would ramble along the floor of the garden and spread out. But here, because we're in the city and this gardener is growing in a 4 by 4 foot plot, we have to get it up, which then allows us to grow in the space around it. So because this plant is up, then we can divide this into, this gardener is using a square foot gardening method. So the 4 by 4 foot plot is divided into 4 1 foot squares. And then within those squares, you can grow something like this beautiful, lovely Swiss chard, or this kale that you see growing right next to it, even alongside something that's growing so vertically as this. If you take a look over here, you can even see that we've got some tomatoes growing in here. And so one of the things I love about this particular method of growing plants is the density. And I'm gonna show you some other ways to grow. So let's keep walking around the garden over here. So the fun thing about the way this gardener has decided to grow is you can see they're using a little bit more of a traditional growing method where the plants, instead of being grown in a square foot method, they're grown in traditional rows. So you've got this lovely parsley next to some, what looks like, oh, I don't know, bok choy maybe? No, I'm not sure what this one is. Next to some lovely, a row of Swiss chard, some garlic chives, and then some pea plants over here that are also, again, grown vertically because these are plants that love to trail or climb. So if we get it up, that makes room for a lot of other things to grow. Another fun thing about a community garden like this is the opportunity to grow flowers, right? And you can see that these flowers are drawing in our pollinators from our surrounding pollinator beds and pollinator gardens, which sort of mostly cover the perimeter of the garden, but you can see that these flowers draw those pollinators in, and they'll then go and help pollinate our pea plants and other fruits and vegetables that may need a little bit of help from nature. So it's fun to, even in these very constrained spaces, be able to add just a little bit of space for some flowers. Let's take a look over here. Now, if you're growing in a small space, whether it's a relatively large 4 by 8 foot plot like this in our community garden, or say you're at home and you want to grow some herbs and vegetables on your patio in a container, one of my favorite plants for growing herbs in containers are these nasturtium. And I love them so much because you can see they're sort of compact, but they have this nice, lovely flowing and draping behavior. They have these gorgeous flower blossoms, which are edible and I love to put them on a salad. And then you've also got these lovely, beautiful leaves, which have this delicious, peppery taste to them when you snap down on them in your mouth. And I'd love to pick one and test one right now because these look so gorgeous. But this isn't my garden bed, so I'm gonna leave these for the gardener who tended them. One of the fun things about growing in a garden like this is being able to take inspiration from other gardeners. So you can see right here, I love how this gardener is growing this beautiful basil next to this purple variety of basil. So two different kinds of basil right next to each other. It's just, there's so many different kinds of tomatoes and cucumbers and all these different varieties. When we go to the grocery store, we typically only find, an orange carrot, and not often do we see the purple carrots or the yellow carrots. Increasingly that's changing, and perhaps you're lucky enough to find those in your local grocery store. But having a garden space like this allows a gardener, a grower, to be able to experiment and try out all of these hundreds of different varieties, and hopefully sometimes expose each other to new sorts of plants and vegetable that maybe you haven't seen in your grocery store. These kale plants are lovely, beautiful, very healthy and happy and massive. And you can see we've got two different kinds of kale. You can see how in a compact garden like this, in 1 square foot, you can plant one kale plant. And then if instead of at the end of the season, just sort of harvesting that plant, cutting it down at the bottom, if you just take off the leaves that you need and harvest as you go, as the plant grows up, you can harvest an older leaf from the bottom. The plant will continue to grow, and all season long it gets sort of thinned out at the bottom of the plant, but that one plant can provide you with fresh leafy greens all season long. It's a slightly different way of growing, but it's one that works very well in a dense urban environment such as this, and one that works especially well using this square foot gardening method that I mentioned earlier. You can see, look at this Swiss chard right behind. I mean, it's just massive, and it's so healthy and it's so happy. Growing in a dense environment like this, maintaining soil health is so important. We grow organically exclusively in this garden, so all of our soil is nurtured with nice, rich compost in the spring. All the beds are refreshed with healthy compost. And then throughout the season, some folks will use other organic amendments as well. But you can see the results in the plants. They're just so happy that they're thriving. And this gardener surely, with one leaf, is going to be able to enjoy a really nice, lovely Swiss chard for their summer dish. I love the creativity of urban gardeners. I mean, this gardener has decided to use hanging baskets to grow these dwarfing variety of tomato plants. I mean, one would think, oh, can you really grow a tomato plant in a container? If you choose the right kind of variety of tomato, you can see that this gardener has a nice handful of rich, ripe, juicy tomatoes ready to be plucked and added to a fresh salad, maybe next to some of the nasturtium that I showed you earlier. This cucumber is a little past its prime, but you can see that this gardener has decided to also make this a vertical plant. Perhaps if you have a larger garden out in the burbs or in the countryside, like some of the other plants I've showed you, this plant might grow along the ground, but in this environment, we can move it up, trellis it, and it really doesn't take up a whole lot of root space down on the ground. It allows us to utilize that vertical space. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to show you around my garden. I love this space, I love my community, and I'm so thankful for the relationships I've been able to build with people and neighbors from all across my ward in this beautiful space. I have so much fun tending to the plants and meeting folks, and if you've got an opportunity to grow a community garden or start one of your own in your local community, I couldn't think of a better way to experience the joy of gardening than alongside your friends and neighbors. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time.